Get out of my first-class cabin now." Flight attendant Veronica Sterling's voice cuts through the premium cabin like a blade as she towers over 16-year-old Khalil Washington, who sits quietly in seat 2A, his Harvard acceptance letter visible in his lap. The leather-bound folder trembles slightly in his hands as every passenger in first class turns to stare. Khalil looks up with wide eyes, his voice barely a whisper. "Ma'am, I have a valid ticket. My seat assignment is—" "I don't care what that paper says," Veronica snaps, snatching his boarding pass. "Kids like you don't belong in premium seating. This section is for paying customers only." The teenager's composure never breaks, even as his cheeks flush with embarrassment. Around him, business executives shift uncomfortably in their seats. Some pull out phones. Others pretend to look away. "Security to first class." Immediately, Veronica announces into her radio, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We have a situation. Have you ever been in a space where someone made you feel like you didn't belong? Have you watched a teenager's dignity get stripped away in public while adults did nothing? What would you do if this was your child, honor roll student, Harvard-bound, being humiliated for the color of his skin?" As Khalil quietly reaches for his phone to send a single text message, he has no idea that help is already on the way. 7 minutes away, to be exact. This is the story of how 7 minutes of corporate discrimination turned into a $50 million lesson that changed an entire industry. Because what Veronica Sterling doesn't know, what nobody on that plane knows, is that this polite, soft-spoken teenager isn't just any kid traveling alone. His father isn't just picking him up from the airport. And when Marcus Washington walks through those terminal doors in exactly 7 minutes, carrying the kind of power that makes CEOs sweat and stock prices plummet, Veronica's world will never be the same. But first, let me tell you exactly what happened when Khalil's father, someone Veronica never saw coming, walked through those airport doors with the authority to shut down everything she thought she knew about power. If stories of justice and transformation inspire you, hit that like button and let's get started. 3 hours earlier, Khalil Washington had kissed his mother goodbye at the departure gate in Atlanta, his backpack heavy with dreams and his Harvard acceptance letter tucked safely in his carry-on. At 16, he was already 2 years ahead of his peers, a mathematical genius who solved calculus problems for fun and spoke 3 languages fluently. "Remember what we talked about?" his mother had whispered, adjusting his collar one last time. "Keep your head up, no matter what." Now, settling into seat 2A on Delta Flight 447, Khalil couldn't help but smile at the irony. While other kids his age were worried about prom dates, he was heading to Harvard's early admission orientation program. The premium cabin felt like a preview of the life his parents had worked so hard to give him. His father, Marcus Washington, had insisted on the first-class ticket. "You represent our family name," Marcus had said over breakfast that morning. "Travel with dignity." What Khalil didn't know was that his father was currently in a boardroom meeting 40 floors above downtown Atlanta, where Marcus served as CEO of Meridian Corporation, one of the largest private equity firms in the Southeast. While Khalil reviewed his orientation schedule, Marcus was quietly reviewing quarterly reports that included major investments in transportation companies, including Delta Airlines. The flight was only half full, typical for a Tuesday afternoon. Khalil counted maybe 12 passengers in first class, mostly business people in expensive suits tapping away on laptops. The atmosphere was calm, professional. That changed the moment Veronica Sterling started her shift. At 45, Veronica had worked for Delta for 15 years, long enough to feel entitled to her opinions about who belonged where. Her personnel file, locked away in corporate headquarters, contained 7 formal complaints about her treatment of minority passengers. Each complaint had been quietly settled or dismissed for lack of evidence. Today, She walked through the cabin with the confidence of someone who believed rules were suggestions, especially when it came to passengers who didn't look like her usual first-class clientele. "Excuse me," she said, stopping beside an elderly black businessman in seat 1D. "May I see your boarding pass again?" The man, Dr. Robert Hayes, looked up from his medical journal with tired eyes. This was his third verification request since boarding. He handed over his ticket without complaint, having learned long ago that resistance only made these situations worse. Veronica examined the pass with exaggerated scrutiny before moving on, her attention now fixed on the teenager in 2A who was quietly highlighting passages in what looked like an advanced physics textbook. Other passengers began to take notice. Margaret Shun, a corporate lawyer in seat 3A, watched Veronica's movements with growing concern. David Brooks, a marketing executive across the aisle, stopped typing on his laptop to observe what was happening. Something was building in the cabin. A tension that had nothing to do with turbulence and everything to do with prejudice about to collide with innocence. Khalil looked up from his book, completely unaware that he was about to become the center of a confrontation that would change everything. Veronica Sterling approached seat 2A with the swagger of someone who had never been challenged. She stopped directly in front of Khalil, blocking his view and casting a shadow over his Harvard materials. "Young man, I need to see your identification and boarding pass." Now, Khalil looked up politely, closing his physics textbook. "Of course, ma'am." He reached into his backpack and produced both documents, handing them over with a respectful smile. Veronica examined the boarding pass like she was inspecting counterfeit money, turning it over multiple times, holding it up to the light. "This says Khalil Washington. How do I know you're really Khalil Washington?" "That's my student ID from Westminster Academy," Khalil replied, pointing to the plastic card clipped to his backpack. "And here's my driver's license." But Veronica wasn't satisfied. She studied his Georgia license with the same suspicious intensity, comparing the photo to his face repeatedly. "This doesn't look like you." "Ma'am, that photo was taken last month when I turned 16. "Don't get smart with me," Veronica snapped, her voice rising loud enough for nearby passengers to hear clearly. "How does a kid like you afford first-class tickets? These seats cost more than most families make in a month." Khalil felt heat rise in his cheeks, but his voice remained steady. "My parents purchased the ticket, ma'am. Everything is legitimate." This calm response only fueled Veronica's anger. She had expected defiance, attitude, something she could use to justify her suspicions. Instead, this teenager was responding with the kind of respectful maturity that made her look foolish. "I think you stole this ticket," she declared, loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. "Or maybe you're using a fake credit card. Kids your age don't just get first-class seats without something fishy going on." Margaret Shun, the corporate lawyer in 3A, looked up from her laptop with alarm. "Excuse me, but that young man has done absolutely nothing wrong. He's been sitting quietly, reading his book." Veronica whirled around. "Ma'am, please mind your own business. I'm handling a security situation here." "What security situation?" Margaret pressed. "He showed you his identification. His ticket is clearly valid." Dr. Hayes, still stinging from his own harassment moments earlier, spoke up from seat 1D. "This is completely inappropriate. That boy is being respectful and cooperative." But Veronica was past the point of reason. "Sir, you need to stay out of this. This doesn't concern you." She turned back to Khalil, her hostility now completely unchecked. "I want you to move to the back of the plane where you belong. These premium seats are for paying customers only." "Ma'am, I am a paying customer," Khalil replied, his voice still calm despite the tremor in his hands. "I have every right to sit in the seat that was assigned to me. Don't you dare talk back to me." Veronica's face flushed red. "I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I know troublemakers when I see them." She grabbed her radio and spoke into it with theatrical volume. "This is Veronica in first class. I need security personnel to gate 12 immediately. We have a disruptive passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions." The cabin fell silent except for the hum of the airplane engines. Every passenger was now staring at the confrontation. David Brooks discreetly pulled out his phone and began recording. 2 other passengers did the same. Khalil's composure finally cracked slightly. His voice remained steady, but tears welled up in his eyes. "Ma'am, I haven't been disruptive. I've been sitting here quietly, reading my book. I just want to get to Boston for my college orientation." "College orientation?" Veronica laughed cruelly. "Kids like you don't go to college. Stop lying to make yourself look better." That's when Khalil reached for his phone. With hands that barely shook, he typed a simple message. "Dad, it's happening." The response came back within seconds. "Hold your head high, son. Help is coming." 2 security officers boarded the plane 5 minutes later. Khalil gathered his belongings with quiet dignity, his Harvard acceptance letter still visible in his folder. As he walked down the aisle, Margaret Shin called out, "This is wrong, and everyone here knows it." Dr. Hayes added, "Son, you conducted yourself with more class than anyone else on this plane." But Veronica wasn't finished. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to sneak into places you don't belong," she called after him. Khalil paused at the aircraft door, turned around, and looked directly at her. "Ma'am, my father always taught me that how people treat others says everything about who they are. Thank you for showing everyone exactly who you are." As he walked off the plane, escorted like a criminal despite committing no crime, Khalil had no idea that his father was already in motion, and that in exactly 7 minutes, everything would change. Drop a comment if you've ever witnessed discrimination like this. Your voice matters. 7 minutes remaining. Marcus Washington stepped out of his black Mercedes S-Class at Atlanta's VIP terminal entrance, his presence immediately commanding attention. At 6 feet 2 inches with graying temples and a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, he moved with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to having his phone calls returned within minutes. Behind him, 3 other vehicles pulled up in formation. From the second car emerged his legal team, 2 sharp-dressed attorneys carrying leather briefcases and tablets. The third vehicle contained his corporate security detail, men in dark suits who positioned themselves strategically around the entrance. Airport Director Patricia Williams noticed the convoy through her office window and rushed downstairs personally. She had seen this level of coordination only a handful of times, usually when Fortune 500 executives or government officials traveled through their facility. "Mr. Washington," she said, approaching with obvious nervousness. "We weren't expecting you today. How can we assist?" Marcus's response was measured, controlled. "Director Williams, I need immediate access to Gate 12. My son is on Delta Flight 447, and there's been an incident." "Of course, sir. Right away." Patricia motioned to her staff, who began clearing a path through the terminal. She had learned long ago not to ask questions when powerful people made requests. She would find out who Marcus Washington was later. 6 minutes remaining. Inside the security office, Khalil sat across from Officer James Martinez, who was trying to understand why a polite, well-spoken teenager with valid documentation had been removed from first class. "Son, can you explain what happened up there?" Martinez asked, genuinely confused by the paperwork in front of him. Khalil reached into his backpack and pulled out what looked like an ordinary pen. He twisted the top, revealing a small USB port. "Officer Martinez, everything that happened on that plane was recorded. Audio and video." Martinez's eyes widened. "You were recording the flight attendant?" "My father prepared me for situations like this," Khalil explained calmly. "This pen, my watch, even my backpack, they all have recording devices. We've learned that without evidence, Discrimination complaints disappear. The officer stared at the teenager with new understanding. How often does this happen to you? More than you'd think. But today was different. Today, my father said we were going to make sure it never happens to anyone else. 5 minutes remaining. Marcus Washington walked through the terminal with purpose, his legal team flanking him on both sides. Airport employees stepped aside instinctively, sensing authority they couldn't quite place. Terminal Supervisor Robert Chun approached cautiously. "Sir, I'm Robert Chun, Terminal Supervisor. Director Williams asked me to escort you personally. May I ask what this concerns?" "My 16-year-old son was just discriminated against and removed from first class on Flight 447, Marcus replied without breaking stride. The flight attendant accused him of theft, questioned his right to be in premium seating, and had him escorted off the plane like a criminal. Robert's stomach dropped. He had heard whispers about incidents like this, but had never witnessed the aftermath firsthand. "Sir, I'm deeply sorry to hear that. We'll investigate immediately." "No need for investigation," Marcus said, his voice carrying an edge that made everyone around him nervous. Everything was recorded. Multiple angles, high-definition audio and video. My legal team is already preparing the documentation. For minutes remaining. As they approached the security office, Marcus paused and turned to his lead attorney. "Are the press releases ready?" "Yes, sir. CNN, NBC, and the Associated Press will have the story within the hour. Social media campaign launches the moment you give the word." Marcus nodded. "And the board meeting?" "Emergency session called for 6 p.m. Delta's CEO will be there." Robert Chun, overhearing fragments of the conversation, felt his blood pressure rising. This wasn't just an angry parent. This was something much bigger. What do you think happens when Khalil's father reveals his true identity? Share your predictions below. The security office door opened with authority that made everyone inside freeze. Marcus Washington stepped through the threshold, his presence immediately transforming the small room into a boardroom where he clearly held all the power. Khalil looked up from his chair, relief flooding his face. "Dad, son." Marcus placed a protective hand on Khalil's shoulder, his eyes never leaving Officer Martinez. "Has my boy been treated with respect?" "Yes, sir," Martinez replied quickly. "Your son has been nothing but polite and cooperative. To be honest, I'm not sure why he was removed from the aircraft." Marcus nodded approvingly. "Thank you for that courtesy, Officer Martinez. I won't forget it." Terminal Supervisor Robert Chun cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Washington, we're investigating the incident. If there was any misunderstanding..." "There was no misunderstanding," Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like steel. "There was discrimination. Against my 16-year-old son. On camera. With witnesses." The door opened again, and Veronica Sterling walked in, flanked by her supervisor and a Delta corporate representative. She had been called to give her version of events, still confident that she had handled a disruptive passenger appropriately. "This is the flight attendant," Robert Chun announced. Veronica looked at Marcus dismissively. "Sir, if you're here about your son, I can explain. He was being disruptive and..." "Stop talking," Marcus said quietly, but with such authority that Veronica's mouth snapped shut. "Do you know who I am?" Veronica glanced around the room, suddenly aware that everyone was staring at her with expressions that ranged from pity to horror. "I know, sir." Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, handing it to her with deliberate precision. "Read it aloud." Veronica's hands trembled as she looked at the card. Her voice cracked as she read. "Marcus Washington, Chief Executive Officer, Meridian Corporation." The room fell silent. "Now," Marcus continued, his voice deadly calm. "Do you know what Meridian Corporation is?" Veronica shook her head, but the Delta corporate representative beside her had gone completely pale. "We're Delta Airline's largest shareholder," Marcus explained. We own 47% of this company, which means, Ms. Sterling, that you just discriminated against the son of the man who signs your paychecks." Veronica staggered backward, her face draining of all color. I didn't know. You were just what? Doing your job." Marcus's voice rose for the first time. "Your job is to serve passengers, not humiliate children based on the color of their skin." The Delta representative stepped forward frantically. "Mr. Washington, on behalf of Delta Airlines, I want to personally apologize for this incident. We will conduct a full investigation, no need." Marcus nodded to his legal team, who immediately stepped forward with a stack of documents. Everything was recorded. Multiple camera angles, crystal clear audio. My son documented every word, every gesture, every moment of discrimination. One of his attorneys handed papers to Veronica, whose hands shook so badly she could barely hold them. "Ms. Sterling, you're being served with papers for a federal discrimination lawsuit. Civil rights violations, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and corporate negligence." Meanwhile, back on the plane, passenger Margaret Chen had uploaded her video to Twitter with the caption, "Delta flight attendant removes black teenager from first class for no reason. This is 2024. This is unacceptable. #Justice for Khalil #Delta discrimination." David Brooks posted his recording to TikTok, where it gained 50,000 views in the first 10 minutes. Dr. Hayes shared his footage on Facebook, adding, "I watched this young man get humiliated for being black in first class. When will this end?" Within 20 minutes, #Justice for Khalil was trending nationally. Veronica's supervisor, realizing the magnitude of the situation, spoke up desperately. "Mr. Washington, please understand that Ms. Sterling's actions don't represent Delta's values. They represent exactly what your company has tolerated for years," Marcus replied. "But that ends today." He turned to face Veronica directly. "Ms. Sterling, you asked my son if he belonged in first class. Let me answer that question for you. He belongs anywhere his character, intelligence, and dignity take him, which, as it turns out, is everywhere." Veronica collapsed into a chair, finally understanding that her 15-year career, her reputation, and her future had just been destroyed by 15 minutes of hatred. The reckoning had begun. Within 30 minutes of Marcus Washington's revelation, Veronica Sterling received a phone call that ended her career. "Veronica, this is Regional Director Patricia Wells." The voice on the other end was ice cold. "You are suspended immediately, effective now. Turn in your badge, uniform, and company property to your supervisor. Do not speak to media, do not return to company property, and do not contact passengers from today's flight." Veronica sat in the airport break room, staring at her phone in disbelief. 15 years of service, gone in one conversation. "Patricia, surely we can work this out. I was maintaining cabin standards." "Veronica, stop talking. Our legal department is recommending immediate termination. The video footage from passengers is already on every major news network. You discriminated against the son of our largest shareholder. There is no working this out." The call ended. Veronica Sterling was no longer a Delta employee. Meanwhile, Delta's corporate headquarters in Atlanta had transformed into a war room. CEO Jennifer Morrison sat surrounded by crisis management experts, legal advisors, and public relations specialists, all trying to contain a disaster that was growing by the minute. "How bad is it?" Morrison asked her communications director. "Catastrophic. #Justice for Khalil has 2.3 million mentions and counting. The videos have been viewed over 15 million times across all platforms." CNN is leading with the story. The Today Show wants a statement by 6 a.m. Morrison pulled up the trending hashtags on her phone. #Justice for Khalil, #Delta discrimination, #Black Lives Matter, #corporate accountability. Each refresh showed the numbers climbing higher. What about our stock price? Her financial advisor looked grim. Down 18% in after-hours trading. That's a loss of approximately $1 billion in market value. Institutional investors are requesting emergency calls. The legal department head spoke up next. Ma'am, we have bigger problems than public relations. Marcus Washington isn't just seeking damages. His legal team filed for an injunction against our passenger service policies. They want federal oversight of our discrimination complaint process. Morrison's phone buzzed with a text from the board chairman. Emergency meeting. All board members. 8 p.m. tonight. Bring solutions. Across town, the social media explosion continued growing. Celebrities began sharing the videos. Athletes posted support messages. Civil rights organizations issued statements. The story had taken on a life of its own. Margaret Shun, the lawyer who had witnessed the incident, gave an interview to CNN. I travel frequently for business, and I've never seen anything so blatantly discriminatory. That young man showed more grace under pressure than most adults could manage. Dr. Hayes appeared on NBC Nightly News. What I witnessed today was pure prejudice. A 16-year-old honors student was treated like a criminal for existing while black in first class. By 10 p.m. that evening, Delta stock had lost $3.2 billion in value. Crisis management firms across Atlanta were fielding calls. Legal experts were predicting this would become a landmark civil rights case. Veronica Sterling sat in her apartment, watching her face on every news channel, realizing that 7 minutes of hatred had destroyed not just her career, but her entire future. Are you Team Khalil? Smash that subscribe button if you believe dignity should never be negotiable. 6 months after the incident, Delta Airlines looked like a completely different company. CEO Jennifer Morrison stood before a packed auditorium of employees, announcing the most comprehensive policy changes in the airline's history. Effective immediately, every Delta employee will complete 40 hours of mandatory bias awareness training. No exceptions, from baggage handlers to executives. The new protocols were revolutionary. Any passenger discrimination complaint would trigger an automatic federal review. Flight attendants caught on camera making racially motivated decisions faced immediate termination. Customer service representatives received body cameras for accountability. Most importantly, Delta established the Khalil Washington Civil Rights Fund, a $50 million foundation providing legal support for discrimination victims who couldn't afford to fight corporate giants. The changes extended far beyond Delta. American Airlines announced similar reforms within weeks. United, Southwest, and JetBlue followed with their own bias training programs. The Federal Aviation Administration proposed new regulations requiring all airlines to report discrimination incidents publicly. Marcus Washington addressed Congress about airline accountability, with Khalil beside him. My son's experience wasn't unique, he testified. It was just uniquely documented. How many other children suffer in silence because they don't have resources to fight back? The ripple effects reached international airlines. British Airways, Air France, and Lufthansa all implemented new equality policies, citing the Khalil Washington case as motivation for change. 3 months after her termination, Veronica Sterling appeared on a nationally televised interview, sitting across from Khalil and his father. Her voice shook as she spoke. I want to apologize publicly to Khalil and his family. My actions were wrong, rooted in prejudice I didn't even realize I carried. I've spent these months in therapy, working with civil rights organizations, trying to understand how I became someone who could hurt a child. She had completed 500 hours of community service at the Atlanta Civil Rights Museum, where she now volunteered full-time, sharing her story with visitors as a cautionary tale. Khalil, now thriving at Harvard, accepted her apology with characteristic grace. Ms. Sterling's transformation shows that people can change. That's the real victory here. Not punishing one person, but creating systems that protect everyone. The interview ended with both of them working together at the museum, a former discriminator and her victim united in teaching others about dignity and respect. What systemic changes would you implement? Let us know in the comments. 2 years later, Khalil Washington stood at the podium of Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, delivering the keynote address for Civil Rights Week. At 18, he had already published research on systemic discrimination in transportation, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and become one of the most recognizable young voices in social justice. That day on Delta Flight 447 could have broken me, he told the packed auditorium. Instead, it showed me that dignity isn't something others can take away. It's something we carry within ourselves, no matter what. His Harvard professors described him as brilliant but grounded, someone who used his intelligence not for personal gain, but to lift others up. He had declined multiple lucrative internships to spend summers working with the foundation that bore his name. The Khalil Washington Foundation had grown into a powerhouse of change. What started as a $50 million fund now operated with an annual budget of $200 million, supporting discrimination victims across multiple industries. They had won 847 cases, securing over $2.8 billion in settlements and policy changes. Marcus Washington had stepped back from day-to-day business operations to focus entirely on advocacy work. He testified before Congress 12 times, advising on legislation that would become known as the Passenger Equality Act. The law required all transportation companies to maintain public databases of discrimination complaints and their resolutions. My son taught me that real power isn't about money or influence, Marcus explained during a 60 Minutes interview. Real power is using whatever resources you have to protect those who can't protect themselves. The foundation's impact extended globally. They had partnered with organizations in 17 countries, helping establish anti-discrimination protocols for airlines, trains, and bus companies worldwide. The Khalil Standard became industry shorthand for comprehensive bias prevention training. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural. Airport terminals now displayed posters featuring Khalil's story alongside messages about equality and respect. Flight attendants received annual recertification in bias awareness. Passengers felt empowered to speak up when they witnessed discrimination. Dr. Margaret Chun, the lawyer who had defended Khalil on that flight, now served on the foundation's board. That day showed me that bystanders have a responsibility to act. Silence in the face of injustice makes us complicit. The airline industry transformed completely. Discrimination complaints dropped by 73% across all major carriers. Customer satisfaction scores reached historic highs. The Federal Aviation Administration established the Khalil Washington Award for Excellence in Equality, recognizing airlines that demonstrated outstanding commitment to fair treatment. Even Veronica Sterling found redemption through the experience. She completed her master's degree in social work and now directs bias prevention programs for multiple corporations. Khalil and his father could have destroyed me, she reflected. Instead, they showed me how to become someone worthy of forgiveness. The broader lesson resonated far beyond aviation. Schools began teaching the Khalil Washington case in civics classes. Corporate boardrooms discussed the importance of accountability. Parents used the story to teach their children about standing up for what's right. Khalil's final words at Harvard captured the essence of what his experience had taught the world. Injustice thrives when good people stay silent. But when we find the courage to speak up, when we document the truth, when we refuse to accept discrimination as normal, that's when real change happens. Today, Khalil continues his studies while working toward a joint law and policy degree. His goal is simple: Ensure that no child ever experiences what he endured on Flight 447. His story proves that sometimes the most powerful response to hatred is not revenge, but transformation. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we can amplify voices that matter. Khalil's story proves that courage plus documentation equals justice. But not every story ends with victory. This is Rise Stories, where resilience meets injustice, stories inspire change, and excellence always wins. We're not just sharing stories, we're building a movement. Hit subscribe, ring that notification bell, and join our community of changemakers. Because every story we tell together brings us closer to the world we want to live in. Your voice matters. Your story matters. You matter.